Welcome to week 5 on MAC366 Film Horror on the Body. The film that we're looking at this week is The Babadook, and we're looking at it in relationship to The Return of the Repressed, an argument made by the English film critic Robin Wood, writing in North America. And this is a film that came out in 2014, although it didn't really get a lot of kind of critical. It didn't really pick up much in terms of like box office viewings until 2015, and became more noteworthy, I guess, in that subsequent year. Because this film was quite a small, independent Australian horror film, which I think opened on relatively few screens when it first launched, and generated something about quarter of a million dollars at the box office. This is a film which cost about $2 million to make, so you can see that as a bit of a kind of failure at the box office in that respect. But it did go on to do really well with the critics, and on the back of that, it was toured around the various kind of film festival circuits, and picked up by bigger distributors in North America, where it ended up taking somewhere in the region of $10 million. So it turned out to be quite a profitable film on that basis. It's one of the most noteworthy Australian films in recent years, and I do believe Rotten Tomatoes said that this was I think this was the kind of third highest scoring film of the year that year. Sorry, it was the third most praised film of the year on Rotten Tomatoes. So this is a film that will definitely be of interest. It might not be enjoyable though. Like I say, it's fared well with reviewers, but not so much with audiences, which we'll kind of see in a minute. It did really well at the Sundance Film Festival, ostensibly, or at least on on the surface of things, it's narratively a story of Amelia, a white single mother, working class mother, whose only son, Samuel, who's age 6, he's approaching his 7th birthday, has got a lot of emotional and behavioural struggles to deal with. And on the day her son would be born, Amelia and her husband Oscar are involved in a road traffic accident, which results in a trip to hospital, and Oscar dies. So the film then fast forwards to about just a few days, maybe a week before Oscar's 7th birthday, when both Amelia and Oscar's world start to fall apart. And in some respects, this kind of falls into the archetype of the problem child kind of narrative within horror cinema, something that we can explore in more detail in the webinar on Friday. But let's have a little look at the film. So, like I said, this was a critical darling. Metacritic has it as a must-see film from a score of 86, whilst users give it a kind of slightly low score of 8.3. Like I said, over on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics loved it. 98% fresh. I mean, that's extraordinarily high. There's only one film I've seen that goes higher than that, and it's the sequel to Creep. Is it? I think it's Creep 2. Yeah, but the audience score gave it significantly smaller. A significantly smaller score. So this might be something which irks and divides the public, particularly in terms of kind of expectation. This is a horror film, but like I said at the start of the module, that quite often we'll be looking at things that aren't really horror. They may be horrific, or they may contain elements of the sentiment of horror, but is this a horror film? I'll let you decide that. Over on IMDb, the public have spoken and given it a paltry rating of 6.8. I mean, still impressive. And over on Letterboxd, where the public vote, it has a score of 3.5 out of. But there's only been a few hundred people vote there. I mean, I give it a 4. I'll probably give it greater than that in retrospect, but that was my review from many years ago. This is what BuzzFeed's Alison Wilmore's called a deftly inventive and psychologically charged horror story that trades on the ways in which the prospect of maternal failure can be just as fearsome as a boogeyman as any monster under the bed. This is Peter Bradshaw writing in The Guardian, says Kent exerts a masterly control and the sound design is terrifically good, creating a haunted, insidiously whispery intimacy that never relies on sudden volume hikes for scares. The reason why I kind of pick these two quotes out in particular is that this is clearly a film about maternal horror, something that we've kind of almost feel like we've done this to death on the module thus far over the last couple of weeks with our work on abjection. This is not a kind of over-the-top, gross-out type of movie, so you can kind of relax in that respect. You don't need to worry about any vomit or blood or pus being thrown all over the place. This is a film which kind of is more disturbing than shocking in some respects, and it deals with it kind of portrays horror through everyday mundane experiences. This is a film about a mother who is made to appear monstrous primarily by lacking kind of maternal feelings and lacking maternal instincts. And I think this seems at odds with what we kind of go on to see as her vocational career in the film, because the film spends a bit of time showing us that she works as a kind of carer in an elderly people's kind of care home. So her relationship with her son is clearly at odds with her overt nature. So that relationship, that maternal mother-child, mother-son relationship, is the root cause of the anxiety and the horror in this film. And that's the thing that you kind of need to be paying attention to. How does this relationship evolve or devolve? How does it pan out? So I've got some questions for you to think about. Like I say, this is yet another film that focuses upon mothers, and I guess it's another white mother at that. I mean, we've looked at the films like The Exorcist, Cronenberg's The Brood, De Palma's Carrie, Ridley Scott's Alien. We've touched on Hitchcock's Psycho. Horror films seem obsessed with this trope of motherhood, something that Creed and Kristeva have spoken to at great length. And critics have pointed out that the overwhelming figure of the mother often acts as a kind of threat to the child, often the innocent child, whose body and very subjectivity the mother wishes to kind of control or constrain or even occasionally consume or eat and devour. But the question I have for you really is, it's not a question that's on screen, it's does the Babadook conform to this? Is that what the Babadook is about? Is that what the film is about? Is it about overbearing mothers? Well, the films I think I've mentioned already can be read as maybe misogynistic expressions of anxiety regarding gender and reproductivity and the family unit. It seems like the Babadook has quite a complex relationship to the maternal and to familial matters, given its emphasis on the more everyday mundane childcare responsibilities of an isolated Amelia and her son Samuel. So it's on that premise, that premise of kind of worrying kind of mother-son relationships that a lot of these questions emerge. So is this a generic horror film? Or do you think the film you're watching is it something else? Is it a melodrama? Is it a domestic drama? What kind of film is this? The writer Karen Renner has suggested that evil children, and I think we could probably kind of put, or at least superficially, we can put Samuel into the kind of figure of, or into the kind of container of the evil child, because there will be times when you will be fed up of him. You will be really fed up if you've never seen him before. You'll think of him as an evil child. But Karen Renner suggests that evil children don't really exist, and that they function more as an effect rather than as a cause of narrative disruption. So that there's something, in order for a child to be seen as evil, there must be something else wrong that has made the child appear that way, because there is some kind of presumption of innocence. Is The Babadook a film about childhood innocence? And if it is, then what is the cause of the evil child effect? Third question. Ostensibly, this film's about a mother-son relationship and grief, or post-traumatic stress disorder, or postpartum depression. In what ways is the monster of this film a manifestation of Amelia's feelings towards Samuel? Try to pay attention to when we see the monster, if we see the monster, when they appear, at what times in the narrative, who they're associated with, what kind of feelings they're associated with as well, because this is very much a film about affect and about the way in which we are supposedly reacting to sensations and to deep held anxieties and feelings. Now, the film does spend quite a big amount of time emphasising Amelia's vocational responsibilities. Why do you think this is? Why? Why does this film focus on her caring role and responsibilities? And you might want to think or compare and contrast what Amelia's like in the workplace compared to what she's like in the domestic context. And the domestic context is, I think, quite fascinating. In fact, the way in which the house, the way in which Amelia and Samuel's home is portrayed, represented, shot, lit, framed within the camera is quite interesting. So, and it changes over the course of the narrative as well. So it's worth you paying attention to the way in which the framing of the characters within that house is constructed. I think in the early parts of the film, you can see that the protagonists and the antagonists are in the centre of the frame. But as we move towards the kind of midpoint and latter point of the film, pay attention to where the camera kind of positions the actors. There's lots of like moments of symmetry where the frame is split and we see, the mother on one side of the frame and the son on the other, and they're almost like kind of representing and portraying a mirror image to each other. There are also really interesting kind of visual techniques which kind of speak to us about visual relationships that go beyond just the kind of literal things that we can hear. And the last couple of questions are really just to kind of gauge perceptions, really. Like, how many days or weeks or months does this film kind of take place over? Because we get a sensation that we get a sense, I think, that this film does feel longer than it actually is. So if you can work that out, that'll be interesting for me to hear. And do you think this film resolves any tensions that it has? By the time we get to the end, what does this film achieve, if anything? So this film, I think, will divide you. You'll either like it or you'll hate it. And you've seen what the critics think, and you've seen what the public have said in response to it. Go into this with the expectation that it's not a jump scare horror film. It is not that kind of film at all. But it is a film that truly speaks to quite horrific anxieties.